Off the eastern coast of England, the sea is grey and shallow and old, and every year the men who fish it haul up something that should not be there. Tangled in the nets, among the cod and the silt, come bones, the tusks of mammoths, the antlers of deer that have been extinct for 10,000 years, and sometimes something far stranger, a spearhead carved from antler barbed by human hands, a tool, which means a hand made it, which means someone once stood where there is now only sea. There is a country beneath the North Sea. We almost forgot it ever existed. Scientists call it Doggerland, and it was not a wasteland on the edge of the world. It was the heart of it. To understand it, you have to imagine a colder, emptier world. Mammoths and woolly rhinos still wandered the frozen plains, the last giants of a dying age. 20,000 years ago, the Earth was locked in an ice age. So much water was frozen into glaciers that the seas dropped over 100 meters. Coastlines we know today simply did not exist. Britain was not an island. You could walk to it, dry-footed, from what is now France or the Netherlands. And between them lay Doggerland, low, green, and astonishingly alive. As the ice age loosened its grip, the land began to wake. Glaciers retreated north, and meltwater carved great rivers across the plain. Where the ice had ground the land flat, lakes pooled silver between low gravel hills. The Thames and the Rhine were not separate rivers then. They joined here, in the middle of Doggerland. Forests of oak and birch spread across the lowlands. Reed beds and salt marsh fringed a coastline teeming with life. Red deer and wild horses moved across the grasslands in their thousands. Aurochs, vast wild cattle, taller than a man, grazed the river valleys. Elk waded the shallows. Beavers dammed the streams. It may have been the richest hunting ground in all of Europe. Whole communities could live well here without ever going hungry. In spring, vast flocks of geese and duck darkened the sky over the marshes. In summer, the rivers ran thick with salmon and seals hauled out along the tidal coasts. In autumn, the woods gave hazelnuts by the sackful, stored against the long winter. And where the animals went, people followed. Hunter-gatherers spread out across Doggerland, generation after generation. They were not primitive. They knew this land better than we will ever know anywhere. They carved barbed points from antler to spear fish and fowl. These are the very spearheads that still wash up in the fishermen's nets. They built canoes from hollowed trees and paddled the river channels. They followed the seasons, moving between coast and river and forest. They traded flint and amber with bands 100 miles away and carried stories with it. They knew every ford, every island, every place the deer would cross. Their map of the world was not drawn on anything. It lived in memory, passed down like an inheritance. They wove fish traps from willow and set them in the tides. Around their fires at night, they told the stories of their world. They buried their dead and grieved them just as we do. They left offerings in the water, antler, flint, and bone given back to the rivers that fed them. For thousands of years, this was simply home. To the people who lived here, this was not a doomed land at the edge of the map. It was the center of everything they knew. Warm, sheltered, and generous. But the same warming that had made Doggerland was already turning against it. The ice that had locked away the oceans was melting, and all that water had to go somewhere. Year by year, the sea rose, not in a single flood, in a slow, patient creep, a handspan in a lifetime, a valley lost in a few generations. Fresh marshes turned to salt, familiar streams swelled into bays. The people would have noticed. The old camps by the water were flooding. Salt crept into the wells and the reed beds. The fish they knew moved on, and stranger ones took their place. The good hunting grounds their grandparents knew were underwater. So they moved, inland, uphill, onto the higher ground. Generation after generation, they retreated from a sea that would not stop. There was no enemy to fight, no decision that could have saved them. Only the patient arithmetic of the tide. There was no flood to flee, no single day of disaster, only a tide that never quite went back as far as it had. A child could grow old and watch the shoreline move a mile inland. Old songs still named rivers and hills that no living person could find anymore. The Great Plain that had joined Britain to Europe was breaking apart. Around 8,000 years ago, the land bridge to Britain finally drowned. Britain became an island, and almost no one was left to see it happen. Bands that had once been neighbours were now divided by miles of open sea. All that remained of Doggerland was a single great island, far out in the new sea. We call it the Dogger Bank. Then it was the last of a drowning world. Perhaps a last few families still lived there, fishing the rich shallows. They could not have known that the sea had one last blow to deliver. Far to the north, off the coast of Norway, the edge of the seabed was unstable. Centuries of sediment had piled up at the rim of the continental shelf. Buried gas and the slow tug of the warming seas had made it fragile, waiting for a trigger. And then, in a single catastrophic moment, it gave way. The Storegga slide, one of the largest landslides in the planet's history. A volume of rock and mud the size of a country slid into the deep, and the displaced ocean reared up into a wave. A tsunami racing south across the North Sea toward the last of Doggerland. It crossed the open water faster than any animal could run, and it did not tire. On the low island, the first sign would have been the sea pulling back. Fish stranded on the wet sand, the water vanishing where it had never gone before. And then, on the horizon, a dark line that should not be there. The wave swept over the island and did not stop. Reed beds, camps, canoes, the last of a people, taken in minutes. When the water finally settled, the island was gone. And with it went the last living memory of Doggerland. Anyone who survived carried only a story of the day the sea stood up and walked over the world. The sea closed over a homeland, and the world simply moved on. Thousands of years passed, the land became legend, and then not even that, until the fishermen's nets began to pull the proof back up into the light. In 1931, a trawler called the Kalinda dragged its nets across a shallow bank far out in the North Sea. Caught in the haul was a heavy lump of black peat. The crew nearly threw it back. Inside it, they found a barbed harpoon of antler, carved by human hands. It was the first hard proof that people had once lived on the floor of the North Sea. That carved spearhead in the net was made by a hand that knew a country we lost. Now scientists map the drowned plain with sound, tracing its rivers across the seabed. They drill for cores of ancient peat and find pollen, beetles, the dust of vanished forests. From a few grains of pollen, they can rebuild an entire landscape that no human eye has seen in 8,000 years. Each fragment is a sentence from a story no one wrote down. Doggerland is the largest settled landscape Europe has ever lost. An entire world of people drowned so slowly that they had time to walk away, and then, at the end, no time at all. Today, ships pass overhead, wind turbines turn where children once played, and somewhere below the keel, the rivers of a lost country still run, silent in the dark. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. These videos take real work to research and bring to life. If you'd like to see more, consider subscribing. This has been Cataclysm History, and I'll see you in the next one.